Hello, my name is Benji Kelly, and this is my final presentation for Introduction to Geology. My presentation is going to be over the effects of impending climate change. First off, there are a couple of different scientific perspectives and opinions on which effect of global climate change is going to be the most harmful within the next couple of decades. The IPCC has found that if the temperatures increase over 1.5 degrees Celsius, then there will be many, many severe consequences on wildlife and the environment and many other things. The increase in temperature may lead to the risk of species loss, increased drought, increased risk of wildfires, increased risk of severity of hurricanes and cyclones, and many, many other harmful effects on the environment. They have also found that ecosystems will change very drastically if the temperature does, in fact, raise over 1.5 degrees Celsius. Another scientific perspective for consideration is the NOAA. They have predicted that sea levels are going to rise by 10 to 12 inches by the year 2050. This can result in more frequent flooding and more destructive coastal flooding, including the destruction of infrastructure, wildlife habitats, and many other things. This may also allow storm surges to reach further inland, and this may have a gargantuan impact on the levels of coastal erosion and levels of coastal precipitation. The goal of this study is to answer my research question, what do my peers think the most harmful aspect of climate change will be in the foreseeable future? The question that I asked my peers was, which of these effects of climate change do you think will most negatively impact the Earth within the next 50 years? Please briefly explain your answer. The options I gave were increasing global temperatures, rising sea levels, increasing severity of storms, increasing droughts, loss of species, decreased food supply, human health risks, and an option for them to record an answer of their own. I used a multiple choice question because I thought that it would be easier for people to make a choice if they had options presented to them. I wanted them to feel more comfortable making an answer rather than coming up with a choice right on the spot. I included an other section on the survey so that if people's answers weren't included in the list of available options, then they could put their answer in that section and it wouldn't be left out of the overall data. I also was able to randomize the order of the options to reduce the bias and to make sure that no choice had any specific reason for why it would or wouldn't be picked more than another. This method also allowed me to analyze my results by counting and graphing the data. This is how I collected my data and the information about my study population. I studied one person who was younger than 18 years old, one person who was between 18 and 25 years old, one person who was between 26 and 35 years old, three people who were between 36 and 45 years old, six people who were 46 through 55 years old, four people who were 56 to 65 years old, and two people who were older than 76 years old. As for how I collected my data, I surveyed people with a Google Forms through Facebook. I surveyed the people who were basically around me, my peers, friends, my family members, family friends, and I did this to better figure out how the people around me felt about this subject. These are my results, and I chose to represent them graphically so that people could easily see how much more one option was picked directly compared to another. For example, you can obviously tell that increasing global temperatures, the tall blue bar, has more selections than rising sea levels, which is the red bar next to it. So I thought that it would be a better way for people to be able to see how many options were chosen compared to others. The results continued slide here just is basically an analysis and a more in-depth um, version of the results. And you can see 61.11% of my participants did not agree with the current scientific opinions that increasing global temperature and sea level rise are going to be the most negatively impacting effects of climate change over the course of the next 50 years. About 22.2% of my participants agreed with the IPCC's views that the increasing global temperatures will be the most negatively impacting effect on the Earth within the next 50 years. And 16.67% of my participants believe that rising sea levels will most negatively impact the Earth within the next 50 years. This is something that I thought stood out, so I decided to include it. And that is that no one believed that loss of species would most negatively impact the Earth, and nobody put their own effect in the other section, so I just thought that those were important to note. So what do these results mean? Well, they show that the majority of people around me either disagree with or are unaware of the current scientific perspectives on which effect of climate change will most negatively impact the Earth within the next 50 years. This can be interpreted as an indication that the public may benefit from further education or perhaps more news coverage on these subjects so that they can know how they can better focus on improving and preventing the most imminent dangers first. This is important because on the bigger picture, it's important to fight the most imminent dangers first, because if something right now happens that could cause the extinction of multiple species or perhaps the destruction of some ecosystem, then that may impact how harmful or less harmful another effect may be in the future. And that is why it's very important to focus on the most imminent dangers. This, unfortunately, does not allow me to answer my research question because although the increase in global temperatures choice was selected the most, it was only by one person and the responses were quite varied. So I do not have a way of definitively stating whether or not the people around me do have one particular idea of which effect of climate change will be most harmful in the foreseeable future. These results are interesting because there are many main media sources and news companies that focus on effects of climate change like increasing temperatures and glacial melt and wildlife and habitat loss. But the fact that responses like increased drought or increased severity of storms were selected more than melting glaciers or loss of species was very surprising and unpredictable, as these effects of climate change are not discussed as often as some of the other options listed. What changes could be done to this study to improve it? There are numerous ways that I could have improved this study. If I were to have increased the size of the study population, and if I would have surveyed people from many different places, I would have been able to find out what people from specific places or what people as a whole think that the most harmful aspect of climate change will be in the foreseeable future. To summarize, this study is most likely not an accurate representation of the whole world's views of which effect of climate change will be the most harmful within the next 50 years, but it did allow me to see what the people around me think. I was able to find out which effects of climate change my peers thought would be the most harmful in the foreseeable future. And I pieced this information, and I was kind of trying to be able to understand how and why these people chose their responses. I learned a lot of things during this study, but it still does need a lot of improvement and it needs to be expanded upon in order for it to have more accurate and more scientifically significant outcomes. These are the resources I used to find the current scientific perspectives on this matter, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.